Welcome to the podcast where we focus on mindset through informal conversations with peers and friends. Whether you're here for insight, motivation, or just to hear two people talk about life, you're in the right place. And trust me, you don't want to miss this one. I'm your host, Colt, and today joining me is Scott. Scott, who has a passion in creativity, is a loving husband, an advocate for mental health, and a true friend of mine. I had the pleasure to work with Scott at a car audio company. Over the years, we became friends and even was my realtor when he sold me this house that we're in. Well, let's get into it. How's your day been, man?
Hey, what's going on, man? Thanks for having me. It's been going good. Woke up early, hit the gym, and here we are, ready to talk, ready to just shoot the shit.
Okay. Well, let's start right there, man. Kind of take me through, because I know you're kind of a regiment man, meaning you got to go to the gym, you got to get your work done. Take me through that process and how you actually got there to be consistent.
Okay. All right. No, absolutely. I mean, so one of the biggest components of that is my wife. She is not the kind of person to sleep in. She's the kind of person to get up, get her day going, and as soon as her alarm goes off, within like 30 seconds, she's up and she's awake. So I was kind of forced into this lifestyle. If she listens to this or watches this. But no, I mean, so the strict regiment with me, it kind of came about just mainly because I need structure within my life. I have a lot of things going on, through work, my ADHD, stuff like that. And I've noticed that by having that regiment, by just building that structure, it gives me a solid foundation for how to go through life. So it's just been one of those ones to where slowly but surely over time with a lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
So.
Are you a person that uses outside motivation to kind of keep you on the path? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If I listen to Scott's motivation, I'd be sleeping right now. It'd be fantastic. But no, I absolutely have to use outside motivation just because there's 10,000 different voices in my head going at one time. So if I don't have a clear rock for me to kind of anchor to, there's no getting over that hurdle. So,
okay.
Yeah,
what sources of motivation then?
Oh my God. I mean, honestly, other people within my life. I love listening to, podcasts, and I don't necessarily want to say it this way, but it's kind of the way that I look at it is, just like motivational stuff, like your Mel Robbins, Tony Robbins,
okay.
All of those different kinds of people.
Like David Goggins.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
Who's going to carry the boats, But I like those kind of motivations, and a lot of that really has to do with my own why and why I do things. So there's that. Books.
Are you reading any books in particular right now?
Oh yeah. I'm reading The Courage to Be Disliked. I just got done reading Limitless by Jim Quick. I'm reading credit books right now because of some of the side projects that I've been doing and everything like that. Okay. So I absolutely love books. I love reading. I love the smell of a good book. There's some people who get that.
Yeah,
there's some
I was
people
just talking to my cousin Kevin. He recommended Servant Leadership.
Servant Leadership.
Yeah.
Heard of it. Okay.
Or The Servant Leadership, something like that. But he put me on to audiobooks. It was the first audiobook I listened to pretty much front to back. And
yes,
you could consume it easier, but I feel like having a book in your hand, like you were saying, is like way better. I don't know, just like something about like going chapter to chapter. But yeah, I've been currently reading Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act.
Nice.
So
okay.
It's hard to digest, though, because each chapter, it's a short chapter, but you're like, what the hell did I just read?
Oh yeah, you kind of got to like reread it a couple times.
Yeah, reread it a couple times because it dives more into like the creative mind and how that whole process comes and how the muse comes down, whatever that energy is, and how that like hits you different if you're in different states of mind, either being like a positive person or hey, you're going through depression. But a lot of artists, that's how when they make some of their best music, right?
Oh yeah.
Like when they're going through depression, and he talks about how he's able to harness that energy and put it towards the person's best project, whatever that may be. If it's Mac Miller, or if it was the Beastie Boys, or even just stuff like that. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, no, I feel you.
Yeah,
the mastery of the mind, and that's for me as a child, it was an escape. So books allowed me to escape into a fantasy world that I could see the clear confines of. Because I mean, growing up, I was I was the awkward kid. I didn't really know how to talk to people. I was perfectly content like playing by myself in like the corner of like the recess yard. I was like, I was good. So I mean, books for me were like an escape, and then that's where I really started, seeing books as a source of moving forward, because I absolutely love trying to understand what the human mind is, just even what consciousness is.
Yeah.
So that's really how a lot of the things that took me down that path really got me started, because I needed to understand, even not even knowing it at the time, how my brain functions, because I don't function like most other people, which is just fun and fascinating.
When you say you don't function like most other people, what do you mean by that?
That's the ADHD.
Okay.
So, or better, I should start and ask you a question. Do you have an internal monologue? So do you have a narrator who's narrating your life as you're living it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I've heard some people don't have that, and it blows my mind.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm like, oh man, yeah. I feel like I'm talking to myself daily.
Yes. Oh, every moment of every minute, it's nonstop. It never goes away. And there's certain people who I work with right now that don't have that internal monologue. They think more as more in a animated structure. So when they're thinking their thoughts, they're seeing their thoughts as more of an animation, and they're actually drawing mental pictures as opposed to that internal monologue, which is just number one, blows my mind, because I can do that too, but that little voice never goes away.
No, it doesn't.
So, that's really one of the things that I wanted to understand and figure out exactly what that is, and how, not necessarily how it can help me or how it can hinder me, but how I can function with that. And then, going through therapy and all of those kind of different things. So I know that you had mentioned that I'm a huge mental health advocate.
Yeah. Sorry to cut you off. But
No.
Tell me, let's take it back a little bit. Tell me kind of the process of when you were a kid. You're hanging out doing alone things.
Yeah.
Just still being creative and happy with life, right? You were pretty happy.
I thought.
Okay. When did you first figure out that maybe ADHD or something was going on, and then how did you overcome that? I guess not overcome it, because you're still living with it daily, but how did you just accept it and move on, and then just kind of live every day and kind of get better, I guess?
Okay, so the sad part of all of this is I didn't find out that I had ADHD until my therapist asked me. We were going over, it was some kind of question we were just going through, it was like a cause and effect thing. It's like, why is it that when I do this, these things happen? Or, why is it when I think this is what I actually do, or vice versa? And he just asked me this very simple question. He was like, well, Scott, how does your ADHD play into all this? And I'm sorry, what? How does my what play into what? And it was really sad, because I always knew that I was different from most other people. I just didn't understand how I was different. And going through that moment, it wasn't really like this profound thing right in that moment. All it did was just spark a question of, okay, why am I different? Why are these things happening? And then that's where things really started to take hold, where I was like, okay, well, maybe he has a point. Maybe he's wrong. Maybe I don't have ADHD. So one of the first things I did, I go home, I take a test. I'm like, all right, I need to know what to do with this. I took a test. I passed it with flying colors.
Oh, really?
But not in the best way, I guess. It definitely was like, yep, you 100% have ADHD.
Oh, okay. What was that? What was the test, I guess?
So it was a series of tests talking about, my attentiveness when it comes to certain tasks, how I go about and do things, how I learn and how I process things. Because the therapy that I do, it's called behavioral cognitive therapy, and it's basically the connection between our thoughts and actions. Because everything is kind of going haywire up there.
Oh yeah.
So I take a test, and it's instantly pops. And I was like, okay, I need to get a second opinion. Let me actually go talk to, a licensed therapist. Let me go talk to a professional.
Oh, okay. So you did get a second kind of opinion.
Oh, heck yeah, I had to.
Okay.
Because I was like, all right, and don't get me wrong, my therapist, Drew, he runs Champions Counseling, by the way. If you guys are looking for a spot, that's where you should go. No, I definitely wanted to seek a second opinion, so I went and got a second opinion. And sure enough, they were like, oh yeah, it's 100%. And I was like, oh dear God, okay, so what do I do? And they're like, there's nothing you can do. There's no cure for this. And I was like, okay, well, I don't necessarily want to be on medication, which, I mean, that's something we can talk about here in a minute as far as that's concerned.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, well, how do I deal with this? And they were like, well, you just need to learn how to deal with yourself. And if you can learn how to deal with yourself, you can learn how to deal with the outside world. So that really broke it down into, okay, what are the next steps looking like? How do I do this? And unfortunately, one of the key takeaways from therapy is always going to be awareness. It's awareness of your thoughts, awareness of your actions, awareness of everyone else and how things are going down.
Yeah.
That's one of the huge key takeaways that some people get, some people don't. And for me, I then start trying to backtrack. So I love playing the game. Have you ever done this where if you're thinking of something or if you're going down the rabbit hole of a thought and all of a sudden you stop and you become aware of the thought that you're having, you're like, how did I get here? You're all of a sudden thinking about bicycles and, an hour ago you were thinking about, the Dodgers.
Yeah.
And you're like, how did I do this? So I love trying to go back and figure out how that process looks.
Oh, yeah.
And sure, all the red flags were there. I was socially awkward as a child, didn't really have a whole lot of friends. I didn't understand social cues.
Okay.
There was a lot of things that really started building that. But on top of that, so my mind runs 24/7. I can't shut it off. There is that constant monologue that's going, but it's not just that though. It's everything else above and beyond that. So noises, lights, colors, actions happening around me. It is all happening 24/7. I can't shut it off. I'll be that guy where we're watching in the middle of a movie and I hear a sound and I'm like, what was that? My wife is like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, no, there was a sound. Trust me, it was there. And she's like, just watch the movie.
You gotta go investigate it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So
now you're distracted. So
yeah,
I understand that, I guess, a little bit more because you talking about having the kind of open monologue with yourself. I'm like, yeah, I have that, but I feel like I've never really thought about having any type of ADHD or anything like that. But that makes more sense sensory wise, more like sounds and stuff like so. Yeah, I mean,
there was a moment I remember us talking. It was probably like 2 or 3 years ago. It was just it was a simple comment, and this was actually before all of the ADHD stuff. And I remember we were having this conversation, and we were talking about getting a task done, and I was like, I will do everything to avoid a task if there's no reward in the task, and it's really only like the procrastination that will really like the last minute of the last hour, I get it. And then you had mentioned like, oh no, when I have a task, it needs to get done, and I only feel better once the task is done.
Yeah.
Whereas I love task avoidance.
See, that just stresses me out.
So
I don't know.
Yeah, but I also love that though. I thrive under pressure. So I think that's why car audio really took off, because it was this huge sensory overload. It allowed me to be creative, and it gave me a deadline. It gave me a, if you don't get this done in time, you're not going to go home. So you better kick it into fifth gear and let's go.
Do you think that's based off of some type of self, I wouldn't say hurt, but like
a defense mechanism?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
100%.
Yeah.
And it again,
has that affected you kind of day to day? Like, do you always kind of try to have a sense of awareness now of when you do that? Okay.
Yeah. Because unfortunately, when I do have a task that needs to get done, and this is why I love motivational things, not because I need the motivation, like, Mel Robbins, she has her very famous, I'm going to count backwards from 5, just like NASA, and I'm going to get out of bed. That doesn't work for me. I get down to 5 and I'm like, that sucks. That 5's gone.
Bed's still warm.
Yeah, it still feels soft. For me, there was another one that I heard where, it was more or less like a, hey, why not? So whenever I have a task that needs to get done, rather than trying to find a way to avoid it, I simply just ask myself the question of like, hey, why not? Why not just do it? And then I get over the initial hump of like, oh crap, like here we go. And I just get it done. But that's where that routine on a day-to-day actually goes through and plays. And I had to kind of reassess how I did things with my wife and how we function together.
Yeah.
And, so there's certain things now, to where, like washing the dishes. I was the kind of person where I just like put a dish down, and if I don't see it, instantly forget about it. Everything in my life, if it's not there front and center, I instantly forget about it. I don't mean to. And this is also part of the reason why I was terrible with keeping friends, because if I didn't see a friend on a day-to-day basis, it's not that I forgot about them. It's just put on the back burner. Like I could literally go a year without seeing somebody, and then the moment I see them, I just pick the conversation right back up. And it's not intentional. It's just how it goes. So I'm kind of terrible when it comes to keeping in touch with people.
Yeah. But it's funny. I kind of want to talk on that because
no worries.
Recently I feel, because I kind of like disconnected the last January, February. I just disconnected from social media.
Yeah.
I let people text me call me, whatever. I only had like 3 or 4 friends actually like reach out, and I have no like
No
haste
ill will
with,
or
yeah,
anything,
ill will
yeah.
or anything about any of my friends. I just wanted to kind of do a social experiment to where you don't have to be in constant contact with friends. But in this day and age with social media, everyone's sending you reels, Facebook,
There's pressure.
this. Hey, did you see that? Even though I just sent you the same video 2 days ago, like
Yeah.
type of thing. So it's funny. Like sometimes the best friends, I feel like, are the ones that you can go months without seeing, and then all of a sudden pick up a conversation.
Oh, yeah.
It's
It's
cool,
just right back to
yeah,
it.
yeah. So
Yeah, and you know the sad part is that in today's day and age with social media, we are bombarded. Social media is, oh my god, it's like the downfall of our society. You know, and I try to say that in a nice way because it's not necessarily that. It's just I'm the kind of person where I love sending people reels. Like I love Instagram because I can easily send somebody a reel, and I'm not sending them the reel because I'm expecting a response. In all honesty, don't respond.
Yeah.
That's way better. Or just send me a reel. It's all good. But they call it pebbling. And it's,
Okay.
Yeah, you know, it's like a phrase I believe from like penguins, and it's like, you know, where penguins give other penguins like rocks when they like them, and they're like little pebbles.
Okay.
And that's my way of just, you know, I try to send people reels just because it brings me that joy, and I just want to see other people experiencing that same joy as I have,
Okay.
without a conversation, because the conversation for me all of a sudden turns into like anxiety. I'm like, oh my god, what am I like? You have no idea. Even just for this here, like the past 2 weeks, I've been like, yo, what am I gonna talk about when I sit down with Colt? And then it just was like, Scott, it doesn't matter. We'll talk
Right?
about whatever comes up.
No, yeah.
You know, and the same thing in therapy. It's like, what am I gonna talk to my therapist about? And I'm like, I don't know. I'll figure something out when I get there, and it goes great 90% of the time.
That's funny because scenarios drawn within the mind, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like
Oh.
you've already made a scenario, you've already
Buddy.
planned it, and that really hinders me. And especially with my work being creative or just doing the podcast, like it's got to be perfect. No,
Oh, yeah.
it doesn't have to be perfect.
It's got to be
It's
perfect.
got to be perfect, right?
Yeah.
So, no, just like having better lights and hooking the cameras up, just little things that don't go right
Oh, yeah.
almost ruin the whole thing for me.
Oh,
because
yeah.
then I'll just be like, nah, don't want to do it. So that's actually why I force myself to kind of just get back into it, do this setup, something simple, one-on-one, because if I can have just a quick go-to and just do it, I'm only going to get better, right? It's
Yeah.
the compound effect.
Oh, yeah.
And it killed me the last time when I did Adventure Forward podcast, because every other podcast I'd be like, well, that wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
And then it finally got to the point where, why am I even doing this? This is stupid. And then I stopped.
Yep.
And then about 2 months ago, 2 random people, hey, why aren't you doing the podcast anymore? I really enjoyed that. Like I would spend like a couple hours watching it, and I'm like, what? You watch the podcast? Like people I didn't even know that watched
Yes.
it. And it's just kind of cool to think about that. And I don't expect this to go to millions, but it's like people were expecting like an episode or whatnot from me, and it actually enjoyed it. And they were simple conversations. So
Yeah.
like it's pretty cool.
This doesn't have to be anything, you know, game changing, and it's one of those ones to where talking one-on-one with somebody is really hard for me, because I am running those constant scenarios through my head, and I'm like, oh my god, like what happens if I spill my coffee? What happens if my chair breaks? You know, what happens if I
Right.
don't know what to say? You know, and I find it way easier to speak in front of a crowd of people. I could get on stage and I could talk to 5,000 people like it's nothing.
Because you're not having like an intimate interaction.
Because
Okay.
I don't have to focus solely on a singular person, because everything is constantly coming in, so I'm seeing your reactions, I'm seeing your small movements, and I'm not saying that like you're like doing anything bad, you know, like it's just that's what I'm experiencing. So when it comes to stuff like that, when it comes to processing, that is where, you know, the awareness comes back into play. And it's like, well, you know, in all honesty, what's going to make you feel better? Is it getting the perfect podcast out, or just getting the podcast done?
Just getting the podcast done.
Exactly.
100% of the time, right?
And the downfall is that most people out there, especially people who overthink, they have 10,000 different projects. They have, you know, all these different things that are on the back burner that constantly floods their mind. It constantly clouds everything that they want to do. And unfortunately, if you're not going to get any of those things done, you're just going to keep living with that. So one of the best things I've ever done was just getting rid of shit. Sorry,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm supposed to be cussing on the podcast. or not,
No,
but
you're
that's
good.
okay.
You're good.
You know, but just getting rid of shit. You know, just getting rid of all the clutter that I had. You know, because your environment is a huge play on everything that you do. You know, and even the people who are uber successful, I guarantee their environment still plays a massive amount.
Oh yeah.
On just their daily life. You know, so getting rid of that, understanding that you know you don't have to be perfect. You know, because you're. I mean, let me ask you another question. Do you think you're ever going to be perfect?
No, never.
No, who
Right.
gives a shit?
Yeah,
the moment that you realize
And
that,
perfect is somebody's perspective on whatever perfect is, right? Like,
and even then, you could have something that is absolute perfection. Okay, let's look at something to where we look at it, you know, from the standpoint of that. So let's go with Michelangelo's David. So Michelangelo spent years just understanding anatomy before he even remotely started carving the sculpture. Okay, just to understand how individual ligaments work, how muscles work, all these different things. And you would still probably have somebody out there that would look at that and go, eh. Like
right?
when looking at that, I'm over here like, oh my God, like that is perfection. You know, but other people are going to look at that and they're just going to go, eh. So what would you rather do? Would you rather seek perfection validations from others, or would you rather just seek the simple accomplishment of getting something done from yourself, no matter what you believe to be 100% or not? Who cares? Just get it done.
Yeah. Right.
And yeah.
It's so simple, but so hard to jump that hurdle, right?
Yes.
And because you can have all these thoughts and you're like, oh, it's going to be this way, this way. You start to do it. It doesn't come out how you want. And that's your first hiccup. That's your first, let's just get it done, right? What you're saying when you get out, just do it. Get out of bed. Just do
like
it, right?
Nike, just do
right?
it. Yeah. You know, like,
But yeah, I guess let's go back to kind of the ADHD, and you were talking about having to take, or were you exploring medication at that time, or?
So not at that time,
Okay.
but once I started kind of looking down the rabbit hole, I was very curious because I started looking at other people's reactions to what the medication actually did. So this was also a big one where I went back to my mom and I was like, Mom, what the hell? Like, did you know this was happening? Right. And oh yeah, you know, my mom was a teacher, you know, for 27 years, and she taught in elementary schools, and she saw firsthand what had happened when Ritalin and what's the other one? Adderall first came out, and she saw the stigmatization around that, and she decided like, nope, absolutely not. I'm not going to have my kid be medicated, because she knew that would probably hinder me in some way, shape, or form, based on society's standards of how we do things. Yeah. So I was like, okay, well, let me look a little bit further into this. So I started looking at other people's stories, you know, firsthand accounts of what happened when they started taking the medication. And there was a really good one that I saw where this guy was talking about it, and he was like, you know, I took it and I went for a walk with my dog in the forest. And I was like, okay, you know, like, tell me more. Cool. You know, so all right. And he said that slowly but surely, about 30 minutes in, he said the voice inside of his head and all the noise just started slowly creeping down until it got to zero. And he said that he just absolutely broke down and cried. It was the first time in his life that he'd ever experienced anything like that. And I'm over here like, well, shit, yeah, I want to try that. All right. Yeah. So, you know, I went to my doctor and, you know, I spoke to him, and obviously, you know, these kind of medications, they are, you know, controlled substances and stuff like that. So, you know, the doctor was very skeptical of me, you know, getting on medication, and, you know, they're telling me like, oh, you know, we're going to randomly piss test you, and, you know, we're going to follow up every single month, and we're going to make sure that, you know, you're not doing anything you shouldn't be doing. And
did that make you not want to do it at that point? Like,
honestly,
kind of
that made me even more mad. That made me like someone who is a professional, a licensed professional, somebody who has a doctorate, is second guessing what I'm telling them. And unfortunately, that didn't sit right with me. I was like, oh no.
From my perspective, it's good to hear that, because I feel like a lot of people are overprescribed.
Oh yeah. No,
so
100%.
like but in your seat, what you're thinking is, fix me, help me.
Yeah. Right? I was like, I'm here asking for help, and asking for help is very hard for me. I'll move a sofa by myself. Nope, I'll figure it out. You're good. I'll pick that thing up. I'll throw it on my back. We'll get it taken care of. So, you know, asking others for help is super hard. And when put into a position of asking for help and someone's second guessing that, I'm like, oh no, we're not going to do this. I'm here asking for help. I need you to help me. Like, I understand why they do these things. Like, my wife works in the works in the hospitals and everything like that, and she sees it all day long. People coming in there trying to get medications because they unfortunately have issues in life. And looking at all of this and everything like that, I was like, nope, absolutely not. I need help. No problem. You want me to come in here and take a piss test? I'll take a piss test right now. Like, I could care less. Like, help me to help me. So they prescribed me Adderall, everything like that. And I was like, okay, cool. Let's do this. So they prescribed me, I believe it was like a 30 milligram extended release. So it was like a 12-hour long medication. So the day before, I was like, all right, awesome. Let me create a list, and anybody out there with ADHD
Can I ask a question? What,
Yeah,
so 30 milligrams, you said?
Yes.
What is that, like, on average? What's usually...
I think it can go anywhere from like a 20 to 40, maybe even a little higher than that.
Oh, okay.
But I'm a big guy.
Okay, I didn't know how that...
Yeah, they were like, we're gonna start you here at this point. We'll see how it interacts with you, and then we'll kind of go from there. So I was like, all right, cool. So I created a list, and anybody who has ADHD, trust me, you know what I'm talking about. You create lists. We never do them, but it is what it is. The lists are fun. So created this list of all these different things to do, and it's just running errands, cleaning, organizing, all these different things. And so it was like 7:30 in the morning. I take the first one, and I'm like, all right, let's just see what happens. And it's like 7:45. I'm feeling tired all of a sudden. I'm like, all right, okay, this isn't doing what I thought it was going to do. And I was like, whatever, let's just go get the day started. Let's just go out there. Let's just run the first errand. I had to go get gas at Costco. So I go get in my car. I pull out of my driveway, and like, as I'm driving down the road, all of a sudden it was like laser like focus. All of a sudden it's like everything just like, and I'm like sitting here driving. I'm like, holy shit. And all of a sudden it's like, boom. There was no outside voice. There was no nothing. It was simple. I had a task to get done, and it's going to get done. And absolutely an experience I've never had in my life before. And I blew through that entire list that normally would have taken me a couple days. I had that entire list plus extra things done by noon. It was the craziest thing I've ever experienced. And at that point, I was like, oh my God, I see why, like, there's a huge problem with this when it comes to like college kids and all this stuff. And all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, like my life, I had never experienced this in my life. And two things happened in that moment. The first thing, I was like, oh my God, I could do anything I want. I could be president of this country if I truly wanted to. Like, if I put my mind to it, let's do this. But the second thing that kind of came to mind was like, oh my God, like, this could be a problem.
Oh, immediately. You're already,
oh yeah, like that instantly came through, and I was like, okay, like, this could be an issue, like this, like, I understand why people abuse this, because this is something I've never experienced, and this was like straight like unbridled power. Like, it was like, oh my God, like someone gave me the one ring. I was like, oh my God, and it was like, okay, cool. So I kind of had to take like a step back and figure out, number one, was this good for me? Okay, was this actually going to help or hinder me? And number two, how was I going to move forward with this? Especially, I'm not going to take this every day. That would be absolutely insane to take this every single day, because I'm going to build up a tolerance. All of a sudden, I'm going to talk to my doctor being like, hey, you should give me like a 40 milligram. But yeah.
So how many times did you have to take the medication?
All right, so how many times did I have to take it? So it's just once daily. So it's, because it is an extended like 12-hour release, I would just take it once daily. So I decided, okay, I'm only going to take this Monday through Friday. I'm not going to take this on the weekends. I'm going to take this when I need to be able to use this to operate and function in my job. And that kind of started changing from there, because, I was still taking it. And in my opinion, it's absolutely amazing. But with anything that's absolutely amazing, ice cream, it tastes great, but if you eat too much of it,
right?
it's going to wreck you, Yeah. So I kind of just started seeing those things, and, I've had people in my life with addiction issues, and that was just something where I was like, okay, if I recognize this immediately, I should probably stop before I get to a point of going overboard. Same thing with like drinking. Everyone has that thought, like, wow, this is so much fun, I should drink more, and then next thing you're blackout drunk, and it's like, I should probably not do that.
Yeah. Reason being, I'm sober because of that reason.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
With that, do you get like an endorphin rush, and then is it just like where you would have the hangover with alcohol, where if you didn't have it, you're just like, oh, I kind of need it? No, okay.
Not at all. No.
Oh, okay, that's good.
I would wake up the next day like, all right, let's go. Let's keep this party going. So I went back, spoke to my doctor, and I was like, all right, cool. This is great and all, but I just need to make sure that if I'm not taking this every day, that I'm not going to have any side effects or anything like that. And in all honesty, my doctor was in agreement. He was like, only take this medication if you believe that you need to take the medication. He's like, don't take it every day. You're just going to build up a tolerance. Next thing you know, it's not going to be working anymore. And I was like, okay. So he was actually on board with me not taking it every single day. He was like, you only take this in the situations where you believe that you need your body to catch up to your mind. Because my mind's running way faster than my body ever was. And that's kind of why it would just instantly be like, no, I don't want to do this. Because, I didn't feel like doing it. Whereas now with the medication, all of a sudden my body's like, absolutely, let's do this. So they ended up putting me on a lower dose medication called Concerta. So I usually take that every so often. I try not to take it every single day for the exact same reason, why. If you drink every single day, you're an alcoholic, you're not just enjoying a beer every now and then, so I didn't want to be basically chained to this medication, because at this point, if I've lived my entire life without this, then why should I need to live the rest of my life with it? So I used it as a tool rather than a crutch.
Okay.
So that's kind of the way that, I kind of go about it. But that also brings in all of the other pieces of, making sure that I understand how my brain is functioning, how my emotions are functioning, keeping everything in check to make sure that I can still continue to move forward, and understanding that when things aren't moving forward the way that I want to, maybe there's another reason. Maybe it's not the fact that I haven't taken any medication today. It could be as simple as the fact of I haven't drank any water. So
so that was kind of the first thing with me, like, not drinking alcohol, is like, you got to deal with the stuff.
You got to feel the fallout.
Yeah, like, it's still there. Whatever made you, like, want to do, I don't know, just going to, like, people with drug problems, whatever made you do that, it's still going to be there once you remove it.
Yeah, never goes away.
So that's when I started kind of getting kind of on the self-help boat, I would call it, and taking the journey and trying to figure out why certain reactions are caused by emotions, right? Mm-hmm. Like, if I'm talking to a customer when I was at Car Toys and I immediately got mad, why did I get mad? Am I getting mad at the customer, or am I getting mad at the situation that I'm in? And why would anger help any of this, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, it never does. But yeah, no, that's crazy.
And it's way easier to deflect that on anyone else except for you.
Yeah.
And trust me, I did the same thing, when I was working there, and I'd have my days, like, it'd be like, a Monday and then a Tuesday and then a Wednesday and a Thursday and then a Friday, I just have a day every day, and I'd get super pissed off, about whatever scenario it is. Yeah. And unfortunately, at the end of the day, looking back on that, I realized that I was never mad at anyone else. I was only mad at myself, because, I didn't understand how to be me, how to live with me. And unfortunately, there wasn't the conversation. Nobody there wanted to have the conversation around any of this crap. No. It was as simple as, let's get in there, let's make some money, and let's leave at the end of the day. So once I kind of started to remove myself from those situations, I've tried to make it a habit of, when I'm meeting up with people who I haven't seen in over a year, in over 2 years, that I'm not necessarily apologizing to them. I'm apologizing for the way that I acted. So I try to just pull them aside. And I'm like, hey, I'm sorry for, anything that could have been said, anything that could have been, perceived or anything like that, during this time. Yeah. Because unfortunately, that will never go away. That's always there. And, hopefully there's not people who have a perception of me of being, a straight asshole, back in the day, because unfortunately I was. But it was never meant to be directed solely at them. It was directed more at the fact of, I didn't know how to process the internal thoughts and emotions that I had at that time. For the exact same reason, I'm one of those people who absolutely believes that there are rules in place to have rules in place. But unfortunately, only some of them actually matter, in my opinion. It's like when you're driving a car, you should absolutely use your blinker. If you don't use your blinker, you're douche. All right. Because your blinker signals to other people of what your intentions are moving forward. Yeah. And if you don't use a blinker, the other people around you are trying to navigate your blindness. And unfortunately, that becomes a burden upon everyone else around you. Now, speed limits are stupid. Speed limits are absolutely stupid. Try to convince me otherwise, but, so when it comes to the self-regulation around all of this, I didn't want to have to use something to try to be better. because once you can start understanding how things work, that's where you can start making the progress. Okay, there's plenty of people out there, that smoke, 2 packs of cartons a day, and they know that smoking is bad, but they're not going to stop. Right. There's plenty of people out there who, are alcoholics, and they'll admit it, and they're like, oh yeah, no, I know I should stop drinking. They're never going to stop drinking. There's people out there that they say they understand these things, but they don't understand that by saying that, by having that acknowledgement and still doing the action, is doing absolutely nothing but hindering you, because you're not taking responsibility behind the action. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you can acknowledge it all you want, but trying to move forward without figuring out how you're reactive to these different things is stupid. It's hard. And there's a lot of people out there that don't want to do that. Like there's a lot of people out there, and I'm a huge advocate and proponent for therapy. I think therapy is the coolest thing in the world, but a lot of people, they want to go to therapy and they want to be told what to do. And it's the exact opposite of that. You go in there to therapy and therapist is like, what do you want to talk about? Like,
no, yeah, the only time I ever had experience with therapy is I was going through like the alcohol classes. Yeah. So it was the first time I was in a group where they were like, all right, tell me about yourself. I was always a person, I like to listen. And I've always been a listener, and I've always used that in my kind of arsenal to help other people or to figure out what makes them tick. Especially being like a manager and a boss, I would always just listen to people, and I would never have my kind of input. Like I would make an input, but that was the first time where I like said something and I was like, no, that was dumb. I was trying to make myself, whatever the action was, I was trying to make myself look better than it because I'm talking in front of people. Yeah. And when I finally realized, be transparent, who cares, whatever, like that's going to make you better. It like lifted this thing off my shoulders that I was just like, okay, yeah, accept me for who I am. I don't care. Yeah. I make mistakes just like the next person, right? Like, and that's what therapy really helped me, was kind of just accepting myself, and I didn't even know I needed that. Like, which is crazy, right?
Oh, you're looking for all this validation outside of it, when in reality, the only person who needs to accept you for who you are is you. I could care less what other people think of me. There's really only like one person who I actually, truly do care as to what they think of me. And that's because, they 100% care about me. And that's my wife. Yeah. For the exact same reason why, you're like, Scott, I truly care about what you think of me. But at the end of the day, I truly only care about like what myself and Victoria think about me. Like even family, family, I'm just like, hey, I understand, but at the exact same time, I gotta be me. And there's so many people out there where they just let that crap rip them apart, and they let relationships just go sideways. Which, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm a huge hypocrite when I say this, because I'm right there with everyone else. It's the human condition,
right?
But I get where you're at. And I mean, and when it comes to therapy only works if you want it to work. There is no quick fix. There is no answer. It's literally you talking and somebody else just going like, oh, like, I hear what you're saying. Tell me more about that. And then you start talking more about that, and then they're like, oh, well, what I'm hearing is, what you're telling me, but what you're telling me isn't necessarily what you're trying to say. Like, tell me more about what you were actually trying to say. And then you're like, well, wait, what? I'm sorry. Wait, no. And then like the more and more you think about it, the more and more you're like, oh shit. Like, okay. All right. Okay. And then that's where you start realizing that you're in a space where it's like, okay, I don't have to have my guard up.
Right.
Okay. Like I can relax because this person isn't judging me. They're not going through and they're not telling me what's right or wrong. Okay. There's a little game that I love playing with my wife, and it's called, are we listening or are we helping? Because, my wife will be like telling me a story, and I'm like, or she tells me about her day, and I'm like, oh, well, I mean, you should have done this. And then I'm like, I'm sorry, am I listening or am I helping? And she's like, we're listening. And I'm like, okay, got it. Tell me more.
No, that's fair. That's super fair that you kind of have that just up front. Are we listening or are we talking about this? Because a lot of times when you interrupt people during a story, like they just had their day, they just kind of want to vent to you. Yeah. That interruption isn't you listening. No. That's you trying to help or putting your 2 cents in.
Yeah,
So.
it's you trying to contribute, and it's like, well, I don't need your contribution. Okay, I need your listening abilities, So, there's 2 rules that I live by, when it comes to my wife. And the first one, it's like, are we listening or are we helping? Because I love helping. I've really had to work on listening. But the second one is, always apologizing for the action when the action is realized. So, if I get into a fight with my wife or anything like that, or, if it's something stupid, because 99% of the time it is something stupid, it's just a disagreement of some kind. But if we get to the point where we're just like not talking to each other, I don't care when it is. I don't care if it's 30 seconds, 30 minutes, a day, a week, whatever it is. The moment I have the realization of, oh shit, I shouldn't have reacted the way that I did. Now here's the beauty of all this. I can still be mad. You can still sit in that. It's all good. But the moment that I realize that, it's a relationship that I'm in, and this is why I'm also, trying to, let people know, like, hey, I'm sorry for the way that I acted, is the moment that I have the realization that I shouldn't have reacted the way that I did, I go and I apologize. Now, here's the thing. It doesn't matter who's right. It doesn't matter who's wrong. It's just the simple act of, like, I find her and I'm like, hey, I just want you to know I am still mad. I'm still angry. I don't want to talk. But I'm sorry about the way that I reacted when I was talking to you like that.
Yeah, no.
And so I could just walk away at that point.
Yeah.
But surprisingly enough, just that simple action diffuses almost every single fight we've ever had. And even then, if it's like a true, like, actual fight, great. We talk about it. We don't just like go sit in silence for 5 days. It's like,
no, because what does that do? That just
you're always gonna have
fuels it even more and more and more, and then something pops, right? But
and then it's always
unhealthy. Super unhealthy,
dude. It's always the question of like, once you get to the point where you're just like, whatever, I don't care about this shit anymore. It's like, what do you want to eat for dinner? It's always like the stupid question of like, what do you want to eat? And then all of a sudden, like, everything's good again. But
no, it's definitely the realization of having that emotion where you get angry, you say something or whatever, and then, you said it, and then you're just like, well, maybe I shouldn't have said it like that, or, hey, I'm sorry, I got mad, or raise my voice, just simply raising your voice. That kind of goes into, like, body language, just... Body language is like 90% of how you communicate, pretty much. So, like, and I've kind of dived into that because I had a coworker the other day where I could just, like, I knew immediately. Like, I was like, oh, something's wrong. Something's going on.
They're stiff. They don't want to look you in the eyes.
Yeah, so I like kind of gave them some space, and then other people within the organization were like, oh, well, he's having a day. He shouldn't be doing that. And I'm like, for me, I'm thinking of, why is he having that day?
Yeah.
Man, how could I help? Is there a way to help? And, like, I don't know. I feel like I think different when it comes to interactions with people like that. And I don't want to call myself the Messiah or the true person, but it's just like, why don't other people think like that? I feel like that's just, it roots and it stems into, like, they want to be better and they're prideful, and this person's having a bad day, so they're just like, oh, well, screw him. He can't have a bad day. But we all have bad days, right?
Bro, this goes right back into what you were saying, with social media and everything like that. It's everyone wants to get their opinion out, and nobody... It's sad in today's day and age how nobody wants to take a step back and just listen for a minute. Nobody just literally just wants to be like, hey, like, and do this. Go up to a random stranger. Okay, and legitimately, this is like I used to do this with open houses. Like, if I was holding an open house, I would literally just, like, when somebody walks in, because, you always have, like, your short conversation, like, oh, like, how's it going? Like, oh, did you guys watch the Broncos game? Like, stupid conversation. I hate small talk because it's inauthentic, it's not real, and people just do it just because of the awkwardness of a conversation. Like, they're like, all right. I started just asking people, I'm like, hey, how are you? Just purely out of the question of just how are you? And surprisingly, the vast majority of people that would just, like, not unload, but dude, they would kind of just unload. They'd be like, just the week just hasn't really been going good. I'm like, oh yeah, tell me more. I'm not trying to sell you anything at this point. I'm just trying to be like, hey, how is your life going? Are you doing okay? Because
most people don't have these interactions.
No.
And it's so crazy because I feel like 99% of people are waiting for somebody to ask them.
They're waiting for somebody else to ask it rather. And I've noticed that by asking that question, it allows me to have the conversation easier. So when I'm talking to somebody and I'm like, hey, like, how are you? And they're like, oh, I'm not doing okay. And I'm like, yeah, me too, dude. I feel you. Like, are you okay? Is there anything I can do for you right now? And people usually, they're like, oh no, it's all good. And I'm like,
still got the standoff. Yeah. Like,
And I'm like, yeah, all right, cool. Like, let's just talk about it. Like, let's just talk to me. It's all good. Like, yeah. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to sit here and tell you what you should be doing. Okay. Because again, we're not helping. Okay. We're listening. Okay. And like just understanding that, so when having these types of conversations with people, it's crazy to me that most people instantly put up a wall because they think that I'm all of a sudden going to try to, like barrel down their position. It's like when people start talking about politics and I'm like, oh my God, like just who gives a shit? Like there is no right side here, guys. Like, but we are not going to get on that conversation.
No,
we're not doing that shit.
Not on this podcast.
No.
That's all right though.
So people instantly put that guard up. Like, no, whenever someone's asking me what's wrong, it's because they're trying to solve something themselves. Like they don't want to know what's wrong. They just want to have that, oh, I helped.
Yeah.
And it's stupid, man. There are things that I do that I don't tell people about, that I don't want, slandered on the internet or anything like that, to just try to help other people, and if anybody wants to know what those things are, I'll tell them in private. I'm not going to tell them, because I don't want the recognition. I don't care.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those ones where having those conversations blows my mind because you can actually see what somebody is truly going through. And, there's this, have you heard of this before? Hyper normalization. Mm-mm. Oh my God. So it's this thing. I of course I saw it on social media. I started looking into it because I was like, that's fascinating. So apparently this was a term that was coined back in the 70s and 80s in Soviet era, Russia basically.
Okay.
Or in the Soviet Union. So back in the 70s and 80s, everybody knew that something was wrong. Everybody knew that the system was collapsing. Yeah. And all the politicians and everything like that, they were like, nope, like business as usual. Let's keep going.
Yeah, even though it was about to collapse.
Yeah, they were trying to force like the normalization on everyone.
Okay.
And in today's day and age, with the amount of information that we are just absolutely bombarded with, everyone knows that something is wrong. But nobody wants to face it. Nobody wants to have a conversation around it. But everyone knows that something's wrong. So everyone's kind of just living their life, going, day to day. And this is, again, this isn't about, like our entire like societal structure. I'm just talking about just solely from the standpoint of, just mental health, and not even like mental health of, like these kids that, like I got tics and I have Tourette's and, I think I'm a dog. And I'm like, okay, there's probably other things that are wrong beyond all of that. This is just simply having a conversation of like, yo, like what's actually up? Like, are you okay? And it's just one of those ones to where having that kind of conversation with somebody is way, way different than just being like, hey, like, did you watch the game? And they're like, oh yeah, I watched it. It was so awesome. And it's like, oh, it was so awesome. Like, okay, cool. Like,
yeah, it's actually diving a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
So,
which is fun.
I guess with that being said, leads me to my next question. What's a moment in life that changed everything?
Ooh. It all depends on how PC friendly this podcast is, and I don't even say that like in like a standpoint.
You could chew on that for a second. I know it's kind of a deep question, and
yeah, I mean, the thing that I go back to the vast majority of the times, and most of the people that know me, they already know the story. So the first time I ever took psychedelics, I didn't know what I was getting into. It just was like, hey, you want to do this? And I was like, sure, why not? And this goes back to like car toys era. And within all of this, I took a huge amount of psychedelics and experienced ego death. It was so much fun, looking back on it now. But basically everything was stripped away from me. Everything. All of my thoughts, possessions, feelings, emotions, everything was completely gone. Like imagine like a white canvas. And all I knew is that I was me. And I knew Monica. Like I knew that like Monica, good. Okay, but that's really all it was. And all of these things were just completely torn away from me. And so I just experienced ego death. And the next day, I just was like, what the hell did I just experience? All of a sudden, life made no sense. And this is really what like spurred the journey. Okay. So it threw me into a massive depression because all of a sudden nothing made sense anymore. Money no longer mattered. Possessions no longer mattered.
Yeah.
All these different things in life just no longer mattered.
So now you just feel like you're floating through life, kind of, and you're just like,
what's the point?
What's the point? Okay.
So I started asking people. I was like, what's the point?
That's interesting because a lot of people that are here that have this kind of mushroom or psychedelic effect are more comfortable with death and kind of just the end goal. And it seems like it kind of had the opposite with you. Were you like, just like, what's the point? Like, or were you still accepting of death, but you were still like, where do I go?
In terms of death? Oh, 100%. Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. It's one of two things will happen when you die. Either something will happen or nothing will happen. And I've experienced nothingness. And all these people, they're like, oh, when I die, I'm going to be floating in this black void and I'm going to be just stuck with me. It's like, no. You no longer have a perception of you. That's gone. You're no longer aware. That is the most like beautiful thing in the world. And I'm not atheist or anything like that, It's the most beautiful thing in the world because imagine, you go to sleep at night and all of a sudden you wake up the next morning and you're like, did I even dream? It was instant.
Yeah.
You just go to sleep and you don't wake back up. Okay. And it's like, oh, okay, that's actually kind of comforting. In a sense of like, I'm not going to be floating through a black void, just stuck in my thoughts because my thoughts are terrible. Or something else is going to happen. I believe that something else is going to happen. And that's a whole nother discussion. But it made me super comfortable with the death aspect. But all of a sudden, the life aspect was completely turned upside down. Oh, and it was thrown chaotically against the wall. And all of a sudden, nobody could answer any of the questions that I had. One of those main questions, and I still love asking this question. I'm going to ask you.
Yeah. What's
your why? And that's not a loaded question or anything like that. I'm just very curious. Like, what is your why? Why do you wake up every day?
I want to answer this with complete honesty, so give me 1 second.
Take your time. That's a huge question. That's not something that you simply can answer in everyday conversation. And in all honesty, this may be a question that you can answer, and then in 30 minutes you're gonna be like, actually, no, that's not necessarily my answer.
I guess initially when you asked me that, it's just I feel like I'm kind of programmed to like have I programmed myself? So yeah, that you're gonna kill me. I'm gonna ask this question to myself, like you said, in 30 minutes. But no, I just feel like I'm programmed to just get up and I would say just simple as do the right thing every day, just and enjoy life. Like, and I've built that throughout years because it used to be like, here's another day. Yeah. But now it's more like, oh, all right, let's get today. Let's get it going. Because I don't know. I think seeing other people pass has really like changed my why, because one day they're here, one day they're not, like, and I ask myself, why am I still here? Like I always ask my question, but then that turned dark quick because then you're just like, oh,
because you're stewing it
without
that outside
but then
voice.
I'm like, well, why not? Like, if I'm given the opportunity to be in this life, whatever it is, this realm of world, just go be the best you that you could be. Like, I don't know. Yeah. So I guess that's my why. It's funny because on my last podcast, I'm going to start every question with, if you were the host, what would you ask me? And I feel like that went into that question because my other guest asked me, like, why I do this podcast. Like, what is that why? So it's funny that same type of theme, but it's just more of why in life.
Yeah.
So I guess turning the question back around to you, have you thought about that, and what is your why?
I've thought about that question a lot. Because as I was going through all this, so this happened like a decade ago.
Okay.
Or maybe even a little bit longer than a decade. I don't know. Yeah, who cares? So I started asking everyone, what their why was. And surprisingly enough, I would usually get two answers. I would either get the why is for money. So people who are like, oh, like my why is to wake up and make a bunch of money and, buy the big house, buy the nice cars, like live comfortably. And I'm like,
on a percentage of people, how many?
50%.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that. That's crazy.
It blows my mind. Because I asked the question.
Yes, I want to make money. Don't get me wrong. I'm a hustler, but like that wasn't the. Sorry.
No. You're good. I had a good mentor back in the day. His name is Jacob, and he answered this with a very simple way. And he said, I don't care about money at all. He's like, I don't give a shit about the number in the bank. I just care about what money can do. And I was like, okay. All right, okay, pretty good answer. Okay, all right, okay, cool.
That's
like
fair
that.
enough.
And then on the flip side of the coin, the other half of the people that I would ask, generally they would say it's my kids. And that never really like sat right with me, but I couldn't really put my finger on as to like why. Get it? Why? Stupid. So, you know, I would always look at those two answers and I'm like, man, like those both, they kind of seemed like cop-out answers. Like it was just a very quick, I don't want to have this kind of conversation. So my why is either money, which everybody wants, or kids, which most people have. So I didn't really click with either one of those. And this is really where like the motivational books like really started happening, and like the motivational podcast, because I was like, what are other people's whys?
Yeah.
And you know, so I started with you know like Simon Sinek's, you know, start with why, and I was like, well, let's start right here. And that's kind of like what like took me down the journey. And it didn't really click with me until I was going to a concert. And this is after like years of asking people this question. I never really had an answer. And we're all driving up. We're going to Taylor Swift, which amazing concert, by the way. Yeah, I'm just
Taylor
saying
Swift?
It was an experience. So we're headed up to the concert.
Swiftie in the house. This is my first Swiftie guest.
Oh yeah. Oh, do you know how I'm gonna piss off all the Swifties? Okay. So this was the Eras tour that we went to, and my sister got tickets, I think, for like $35 a piece. So for all you people out there, suck it.
All right, carry on.
So we're driving in the car, and they're talking about this story about there was this family. It had a house fire, and unfortunately, everyone perished in the house fire with the exception of the mom. Okay, so you know, the dad, the kids, the dogs, bro, like everyone passed away, and the mom survived. Luckily, she was in the hospital. She was in a coma, and they were talking about it like, oh well, when they wake her up, be like, they would have to break the news. Your entire family's gone. And I was like, holy crap, that would suck.
Steve.
And they were talking about it in the car, and they were like, oh, don't wake me up. Nope. Take me out of misery, pull the plug, don't wake me up. And I was like, damn, all right, well, hold on. Let's talk about this, because I love playing devil's advocate. And I'm thinking about this, and I'm like, well, if your child was in the same position and everyone else had perished and you had perished, do you think your child to say the same thing? Do you think your child to say like, oh, nope, pull the plug? And then the more and more I started thinking about this, the more and more I was like, probably not. So it really just got me thinking. And here's the thing. I'm not knocking on anyone's decision for that. That is purely theirs. I started questioning it from my standpoint. And I was like, okay, well, if your children perish.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, okay. Sorry, we're just working on a timer. So if your children were to perish, or sorry, if you perished, would your children say the same thing? And the more and more I started thinking about this question, the more and more I was like, well, hold on. They probably wouldn't do the same thing. They'd probably continue to live their life. And then at that point, I started thinking, well, if you say that your children are your why and you lose your children, does that mean that you all of a sudden lose your why? Is that... Because here's the thing, your children don't necessarily have like unconditional love or anything like that. And sorry, it looks like you wanted to ask me a question.
Yeah. Who did you share this conversation with, if you don't mind me asking?
Okay, so this conversation was who do we have in the car? So it was our concert crew. So it was my sister, our friend Laura, my niece was also in the car. My mom was in the car.
So several people, and they all said.
Yeah, they were all in agreement. Because they all have children, which, maternal instincts, I can't knock them for that. But the more and more I started thinking about that, the more and more I was like, well, hold on. Like, if your why were to perish in a fire, does that really mean it's your why? Because you're still there. Mm-hmm. And it really just got me thinking, where I was like, okay, well, if most people are telling me that their why is money, or if most people are telling me that their why is kids, and both of those things can be taken from you, does that really mean that's your why? And, or better yet, I should refrain and reframe that question by saying, would that be my why? Because I can't really knock somebody else on their why. It's just none of it resonated with me. And all of a sudden in that moment, it was like, oh shit, my why is me. My why is to be the best version of me that I can be, because the only way for me to be the best version for every single other person out there is to be the best version of me. If I can't help myself, I can't help anyone else. And if I can't help anyone else, what's the point of trying to help myself? And that's where like things really started taking off with therapy. That's where all these things go. Because when I say, man, I was even asking my therapist about, depression, where I was like, dude, I'm at the bottom of the hole. Like we're 2 seconds away from a trigger pull here, my guy. And trust me, I've been there.
Yeah.
So it was one of those ones to where he put me onto a really good book. It's called Allegory of the Cave by Plato. The philosopher.
I've heard that book. Yeah, I haven't.
It's only like 50 pages long.
Oh,
it's
okay.
it's basically
So
like a story. It's not really like a book.
Okay.
And it just talks about, these people who are chained in a cave and they've never seen sunlight, and all they can see is they can see, shadows on the wall in front of them, but they can't see anything behind them. Okay. And one person breaks free and they get out of the cave and they're looking around. They're like, oh my God, like this is the best thing ever. It's sunlight. And they go back into the cave and they try to tell everyone else. And they're like, oh my God, you guys like come out here and see this with me. And everyone else is like, nope, you're wrong, false, there's nothing out there, you're lying to us, You're delusional, yada, yada, yada. So I realized that through a lot of this, experiencing that and asking people why, I was like, oh my God, I was the person in the cave who broke out. And I was trying to tell people like, no, like there's so much more. And people are just like, no. And within all of that, that's when I just started realizing, I was like, okay, if there's anything that I can do, it's I can help other people out. Okay, it's and here's the thing. I will do anything I can to reach back and pull anyone out of the hole and push anyone forward. Okay. That's all I want. I don't want anyone to have to suffer in that, because these people who freak out because something went bad on social media, they've never experienced it. These people who are like, oh, like I'm depressed.
Yeah, actually, I had a coworker that when I was working at the Broadmoor, after Trump got elected, I would go in the next day, and he's like literally like about to cry. I feel like I felt like, and I was like, what's wrong? He's like, I don't know, man. Just now that he's elected, and I was like, oh, Trump? And he's like, yeah, and I don't know, man. We're World War III, and I'm like, all right, man. Okay. I was like, I'm a little older than you, but like, and this is how I look at it. Most of the time, those decisions don't affect us.
Nope.
Like, and if we go to World War III, whatever that you have in your mind, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen so quick, and whatever. You're gonna have no control of it. So why let your whole
let it control
day?
You?
Yeah, I was like, why let your whole day get ruined over that? He was like, oh, I guess, man, but like he was just so high strung about it, and I didn't know how to get to him and like take that out, because there were other instances where like he would let the dumbest stuff affect him that didn't truly affect him. He was just making scenarios up in his head. So it's weird how people do that,
and it's hard. It's hard to recognize that. It's hard to recognize when you're letting something else outside of you control the way that you feel, the way that you react. I mean, just look at our reactions. I mean, just look at this could have been either way. Either one person winning or another person winning. Everyone would have freaked out in some way, shape, fashion. And honestly, I was looking at all this like, who cares, bro? Like, this will not affect me going to the gym tomorrow. This will not affect me showing up for work. This will not affect my drive. Like, I don't care. Not that I don't care about, like our country and everything like that. It's just these kind of things everyone lets the smallest shit control them,
Right.
A sporting team, if someone's sporting team loses and they're like, oh my God, it's the end of the world,
I still kind of let it affect me, but
I mean,
it's all in good fun.
You should,
like,
I don't know.
Yeah,
don't worry, I'll knock on anyone's team. I could care less. Like, it's
for me. Yeah. I did have a point where I was just like, oh man, I'm angry, but then I'm like, all right, I enjoyed the game. It was a game, whatever, and there's gonna be more. Like, whatever. That's where I really kind of enjoyed sports at a different level than most people too, in that aspect. Speaking of reactions, leave that like, that thumbs up if you love this podcast. We're gonna change gears a little bit here. What's a belief or mindset that's really shaped who you are today?
Ooh,
the current Scott.
I would say a belief. I was doing this. I call it transformational coaching. I don't know what they would call it. It's this place up in Denver where they do stuff like this, and they it's like a 3 12-hour days, and it's like 150, 160 people in there, and they're basically just talking about how we view the world, and like the filters and the shades that we put on to see the world the way that we want to see it. Is like the easiest way to describe this. And towards the end of it, they're like, oh, like, we'll let you know what the secret to life is. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like, someone's going to have the secret to life. And of course, there's other people in all of this, and they're like, oh my God, like, what's the secret? And I'm like, there is no secret.
Yeah.
And of course, we get to the end of it, and they're like, yeah, we're going to tell you the secret of life. And of course, they're like, straight up, they're like, the secret is that life is meaningless and worthless.
Oh.
And I was like, damn, bro. There was people that were pissed, bro. Like, they were full on pissed in all of this. And I was like, oh my God. Because, people are letting their guards down and all this. So
yeah.
I was hearing other people's stories that, like, made mine look like a walk in the park. Like people talking about, taking somebody else's life and, things that happened to them personally. It was crazy. But like, people were mad about this, and I'm over here like laughing. I was like, oh my God, it's hilarious. Because just like the cynic part of me was like, this is great.
Yeah.
But there was another guy that was there. It was a Filipino gentleman, and every single time we went and took a break, like every hour and a half, we'd have to sit in a new location next to somebody we haven't sat next to.
Oh,
so,
okay. That's cool.
And then they would, whatever they were talking about, they would ask us to reflect on it, and talk to your partner. And I was like, okay, cool. So I'm talking to this guy. I can't even remember what we were even like remotely the discussion was, or maybe it was just something as simple as like, oh, like, what have you learned so far? And this guy turns to me and he goes, man, I didn't realize that everyone has problems. And in that moment, I was like, oh my God. Like,
that's not one person just walking through life like, oh, this is so easy.
And it's so profound when you hear that from somebody else, where it's like, man, everyone has problems. Like, everyone has problems, bro.
Yeah.
And it's, my problems will always be my problems, and everyone else's problems will always be everyone else's problems.
Yeah.
But damn, just to realize, and it's just the whole thing of, like, oh, like, don't get mad at someone in traffic because who knows what's going on in their day. They could be rushing to the emergency room. It's like, okay, cool. But yeah, everyone's got problems, and your problems they may be big on a scale in your mind, but not big on a scale according to everyone else. So don't let your problems dilute your way of how you see the world and how you treat other people. And that was a big one for me, where, life is meaningless and worthless. So why are you taking it so damn serious? Everyone has problems.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No,
I like that one.
Yeah.
What about you? What's your answer?
I would say a belief that really kind of shaped me is just to hit every day and just to be positive, man. Like, I don't know. I just really work on this like energy vibe, and I every time I say that, I feel like it's like has a hippie stigmatism, but it's just like, if I project good energy, I'm gonna receive good energy, right? Like, so that's all I try to do, and that's like my belief in the world. And I think that's rooted from like my parents, because my parents have always just been like happy, helping, and a servant to other people. And what is that helps you be a better person yourself if you're helping someone else? Just where you were saying you grab somebody and you kind of push them forward, that ultimately makes you feel better, right? Like at the end of the day, right? So I guess that kind of brings me to the podcast, and why I do the podcast is to learn other people's stories, figure it out, kind of what has got them to the point that they're in their life now, and try to use this platform to show other people that people are going through the same problems or different problems, but we're all just still trying to make it, right? Yeah. So
we're just going through it. It's life. Yay. Don't, or like what's the Van Wilder quote? Like, don't take life so serious. Like, you're not gonna make it out alive anyways, or whatever it is. Yeah. Have fun with it.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap it up a little bit with that being said. What would you like everyone to remember you for? And he will be back. Don't worry. We're gonna have Scott on the podcast again. It's just, I want to ask that question to my guests. Is kind of like, do you want to be remembered for something, or do you even care on that aspect?
I truly don't. There's people out there who want to be remembered, like they want to have like their name chiseled in history, and I'm like, okay, I get that. Okay, it's cool. Like, do your thing. I've come to the recognition, that's not going to happen for me. I'm not going to be, a Julius Caesar. My name won't be remembered forever. But in all honesty, the one thing I want people to understand is that they're not alone. Okay, there's everyone else going through this, and until you can recognize that it's okay to ask for help, nothing's going to change. So if there's one thing that anyone should ever take away from this, I don't care who you are. If you don't know me, you don't have to know me. It's all good. Literally reach out. I'll talk to you. Okay. I'm not going to try to tell you to do something. I'm not going to judge you. Just understand that the first way to help, the best way to get your life going is to just ask somebody else for help. No matter what that may look like. I don't care. But I'm not going to help you move a couch, though. So don't ask that.
Nothing changes if
nothing changes.
Man.
Yep.
Yep. I love that little quote. Well, it's been a pleasure, man. Cheers.
Word.
Coffee.
Cheers to you.
Good conversation. And we'll see you next week.